Well, welcome back to the last session this afternoon. At the end of this session, we're going to have a Q&A session, so if you feel a question bubbling up, make a note, and we'll handle it then. We're now going to hear from Gil Wasserman about SoundGrid. Gil is from Waves Audio.
Hello everybody, I'm Gil from Waves. I'm the director for Waves Live Sound Division and the SoundGrid project. I'm going to assume that you know what Waves is about, what Waves Audio do. Basically we're going to talk about audio networks, and it looks either like this on stage or like this in the studio. Now, when Zen asked me to come over and talk about SoundGrid, and asked him what the main focus of the talk is going to be, he asked me to sort of explain and talk about how audio networks are easy and simple, and it's nothing to be scared of. So this is my tribute to Zen. Zen, this is for you. The basic idea is how to get into those scary diagrams, but do it simply. And the take that Waves went for in this direction was to think of the people who are working in these setups and try to make the network more human-centric. So here I'm going to talk first explain a bit about what SoundGrid is. Because it's not really a network. I mean, parts of it is a network, but we see it more as an ecosystem, and I'm going to explain why. And then I want to talk about how it started, because this will give you the feeling of what it is. I mean, not the technical knowledge, because I'm not a technical person, but it's going to give you the feeling of what it is, where it's going, its concepts. And I'm going to finish with a few user stories, real-world stories that are actually happening today. Because we started about 5 to 6 years ago, and today SoundGrid systems are specified in 8 out of the 10 topmost stores in the world for the last 2-3 years. The rest of the other 2 we're not there because they're analog. But all of the digital A-class stores use Waves, from Bruce Springsteen to Lady Gaga to whoever they are. So it's a network, and it starts with a switch. So part of SoundGrid is moving audio from one node to another, same as any other network. We've got I/O devices, be they cards that get installed on consoles such as Yamaha, Allen Heath, Digico, and more consoles, or MADI devices that can take 128 channels of MADI into the network or translate into the network and out of the network, or standalone devices, analog, digital, and they sit in live setups and also in studio setups. So one part of SoundGrid is like any other audio network, is get audio quickly from one end to the other. I think that the latency from one audio node to another is about 16 samples. Another part of SoundGrid is processing, because Waves is basically we started as a plugin company doing audio processing. So we can't just move audio from one point to another. I mean, that's not what we are about. We've got to have processing in there somewhere. So we've got what we call DSP servers, and these guys can process 128 channels of audio in either 48 or 96K. Each one of those can run, I mean, depending on the model, but the mid-range model can run about, I think it's 200 and something multi-band compressors at the same time, something like that. We got more powerful servers or less. So processing has got to be there. Again, because we live also in studio space, then people want audio in and out of the other DAWs. So we've got an ASIO and a core audio driver that can receive and output 128 channels of audio. And of course, we need something to control everything. So this is what we call a host. It's an application which allows you to discover the devices, do the routing, set up the processing, route channels to and from the DAW from your I/O devices. Basically, it's where the operator or the actual person who controls everything sits. So this is SoundGrid. I mean, these are the functions of SoundGrid. From this, you come to the larger diagram by just adding more. But adding more in a different way to other networks because we're thinking in the way this diagram was drawn. We're thinking about domains. There's the front of house domain. There's a guy sitting there, and he's got his devices. And he wants to control the mic pre's, and he wants to control the sample rates. It's his devices. And there's the monitoring guy who's got devices, and there's the guy who sits in the broadcast van, and he's got his own devices. And they can communicate. They can be clients of other devices. But they've got what was previously termed different access privileges. We call them an owner versus a client. I mean, I own my devices, meaning I control my mic pre's, and I've got priority over my outputs, for example. If another guy from another domain wants to use my outputs, he can, but I've got priority over them. Another aspect of SoundGrid is control of devices. I've got intimate control of my devices. I can control, if it's a MIDI box, that I can control, of course, its clock source, whether it's a 64 or 56 channel MIDI channel mode, and various aspects of MIDI depending on the device. If it's an analog box, and I can control its phantom power, its high pass, its mic pre, depending on what that box provides. So it's a way from getting from this simple diagram into this is very simple, just adding more. When I thought about this lecture, and I wanted to sort of deliver the idea of SoundGrid, I was thinking that maybe the easiest way to deliver is by telling the Wave story, of how it came to be. Then you'll get a better feeling of what it is. So Wave started as a plugin company, and we do a lot of audio processing, whether in the recording, broadcast production side, film industry. And we were looking at a way for getting our plugins from the studio and out to the stage, to the live sound. Because a lot of people, a lot of actual engineers were migrating from the studio to live sound and back to the studio. I mean, a sound engineer on tour is going to record the show, and later on is going to mix something probably in the hotel room. Or is going to record the show for a DVD, and later on the same engineer is going to take the recording to the studio and mix it and produce a DVD. So the same guy is moving in both spaces. I mean, it's not segmented. Actually, there's a flow. But in the live sound market, there's no plugin architecture like in the recording industry, like VST or DAE. So we had to think of something. Okay, so we had code from another project which allowed us to process plugins in real time on a Linux on a regular Intel-based CPU. Brilliant. This is very efficient from our point of view. I mean, one such server, as we call them, can run, as I said, 200 multi-band compressors, multiple reverbs, and of course so it's a very powerful machine, very, very cost-effective. But we need a way to get audio in there. So how do you get audio in there? Ethernet, it's already there, right? So this is how, in a sense, SoundGrid started. It started as a real-time processing platform. Real-time, I mean, as guys said before, it's not really real-time, but it's 0.8 millisecond for the whole round trip. Let's say from a console card to the server, processing and back. So we started with processing. This was received actually very well by the live sound market, because instead of carrying racks and racks of equipment, suddenly you carry a 2U server, another server, let's say for redundancy, and you're done, and that's it. And you can load up compressors, EQs, everything that you've used in your recording sessions, or actually in the original album. You can now port everything as is or as a starting point to your digital console on every channel. Because you can spread out to, let's say, 128 channels of processing. This is really nice. And this is something that it takes very, very small space in the van and shipping. Or actually, we've got people who've got servers that are this small, and they carry all of their, let's say, front of house rack in the backpack. It's a card, it's a small switch, small server, a laptop, and you're done. And you got 16, 64, 128 channels of processing. With your signature sound. So it started like that. Then we got asked, said, hey, actually, if I got a laptop, then I want to add recording and playback because I got the laptop there. So instead of the laptop just doing control, let's drive some audio into it and out of it. We said, okay. So we've written an ASIO and a Core Audio drivers. What is termed in the Dante world virtual sound card, for us it's a driver. And from this point on, a sort of a network started coming into being. Because up till now, it was a point-to-point, just processing. Very simple setup, very straightforward setup. I mean, just discover the devices, say, this is my sound card, this is my server, and popping the interface for loading up plugins. And then we're again in audio space. I mean, no network interfaces. I mean, the whole of the interface, all of the thinking, has got to speak and got to relate to the audio guys. No, they're not networking guys. And they got to feel safe with it. And it's got to be a system that you can set up in 15 minutes, 20 minutes, because they come into a show, the time is limited, and if it's going to take too time, they're not going to be bothered with it. So it's going to be robust and it's going to be simple to set up. Today, we've got people coming in, and in 15 minutes, I mean, for example, we've got a card for a Yamaha console, and I've got guys that telling me they're coming to let's say, a club, and they've got a console there, they power the console down, they take the cards out, they put their cards in, 20 minutes and they're up. And the mix is already done because everything in a sense is mixed with the plugins. So it's already done. Once you start getting into recording and playback, then it's not just point-to-point, but you've got channels going into your recording device. And then the question, you want to record pre-processing or post-processing, or some pre-processing, some post-processing. So you get into routing. So now there's a network. And then they actually asked us, well, we got recording, which is great, but we need backup recording. Same channels on a different computer doing backup recording. So we need to split the signals. Now, think that a SoundGrid I/O node can do 128 channels in and out. Okay? Once you got, let's say, 64 channels going to processing, 128 channels going to recording, then splitting them from, one point to another, we're talking about a few hundreds of channels. And that's very simple. I mean, it's very simple to get from, first stage to second stage, just like that. Because just backup recording duplicates the number of channels you're running on a network. Brilliant. They like that and started, and from that point on, it's almost a network, because the next stage was, okay, we've done that for live, but now because we live in studio space, let's get the same devices, the same abilities that we give to the live sound guys back to the guys who live in broadcast or in the studio. So now we got studio interfaces. And the story is getting really, really interesting, because now we've got networks that people carry in their backpacks, up to facilities that got various mixing rooms and various recording rooms, and they share audio. Just because, it's like you give them the ability, you give people the ability to do that, and suddenly they get more creative than you. And this is what happens today. We were thinking about networks, but now we get stories that, I'm a bit jumping ahead, but let's say we got one church, they came with us and they needed a large number of mic pre's on stage. Great, we got devices that very good mic pre's into SoundGrid. They got like their mic pre's and the SoundGrid port at the back. Great, but they need to record to Pro Tools. Okay, we got Pro Tools interfaces to SoundGrid, not a problem. Put all those devices on the other end, get a switch, you're done. Yes, but they got also another room, another venue with the Yamaha console. Not a problem. Put a card there and you split the signals. And they've got another broadcast room with a MADI console. Not a problem again when you got the interfaces. Now what happens is that they record to Pro Tools on one end, and at the same time they got the broadcast console using the server on the device that's actually in the Pro Tools room, because it's a network. I mean, it's there. I mean, they see the server, and it doesn't matter whether geographically it's close to you or it's another room. It just doesn't matter. And they use the server that server over there to process the audio that goes into the broadcast while they record the unprocessed sound to the Pro Tools. And this is something that they came up with because it's kind of a Lego set. You give people the bricks, and you give them a simple interface and some basic logic of what works and how the system operates, and from that point on, they just fly. The way SoundGrid is today, I mean, it's a system that keeps evolving, and I call that an ecosystem. Why? Because it's not just about moving audio about. An audio network should, of course, move audio from one place to the other, duplicate it, transport it. But we took sort of one step beyond that. And that's why I think, in a sense, we're not really an audio network, at least not just that. SoundGrid allows... Okay, I'll do that. The concept that we use, and this is something that when I was looking at other networks, so this is something that differs SoundGrid from other networks, is that we think of host. A host is a control software, and that control software represents an actually human operator. And that human operator, as I've said, can control devices. He owns devices. These devices are mine. When they're mine, they mean they're assigned to me. The session that I save, the session file that I save, remembers the devices that I've used, remembers that they're mine, remembers their settings, remember their routings. Even devices that I'm the client of, devices that do not belong to me, the session remembers. Now, of course, what happens if I come the day afterwards and someone took away that device? So there's an abstraction layer. I've assigned device number 1. I can assign another device as number 1 in my inventory, and all of my connections resume. But now they're patching to the other device. All of that, so we got the concepts of ownership, the concept of clients, the concept of, for example, if I'm the host and I own devices, what happens if I crash? Because crashes happen. I mean, it just happens in the real world. So yes, I recover, but what happens in the meantime? Can someone else grab my devices? No. Actually, what happens is another host takes over. He needs the guardian for my devices. He sort of maintains my interests. And these are the concepts that we think of. Okay, these are the concepts that we play with. We think of domains and groups and ownership and guardians, and devices that have lost their owners are called orphans. And everything, all of that is something that the user doesn't see. What he sees is a nice interface for loading up devices. They got their nice icons. This is the inventory. So he said, it opens up a drop-down menu. He sees all of the devices on the network. He selects a device, and that device is now assigned to him. Or it tells him that it's in use by another device, but he can be the client, or he can use that. Got a nice mixer. This is again a routing. This is part of a routing patch, and also allows you to load up plugins. Again, the interfaces, from our point of view, it was very important to maintain the audio language, not to drift into networking, because the people sitting there before the consoles, before everything, they're audio guys, and you want to keep to make things intuitive for them, that the ramp, the learning curve will be, sort of not steep. So this is a mixer. This is, for example, as a control panel for a device, meaning that device can sit in another room, it can sit in another domain, but I do have access for that device's specific parameters. In this case, it's the mic per gain. I select the device, I see the audio levels, and I get access to its mic praise. Or clock sources, whether that device slaves to word clock, slaves to the clock over the Ethernet. All of these interfaces pop up on my host, and that my host can be the control panel for my DAW driver, because then again I get devices that I want to record, or in whatever my processor is. One of our host application is called multi-rack. And that represents racks of processing blocks. And it's got pages for setting up IOs. It's simple as that, and it's important to keep the language simple. So, SoundGrid is about audio routing like every other network. I promised to do that. I promised you. When I started that, my opening sentence should have been that I'm going to emphasize my speech by thumping on the microphones. More times than then, at least. So it's about audio routing, it's about device control, it's about audio processing. Of course, redundancies and recoveries, because we're talking about a live show or a broadcast show, and we can all go black. It's a no-no. It should be glitch-free and seamless recovery. And of course about interaction learning, the interaction between, again, the people operating the various domains in the setup. If it's a live setup, then you've got front of house monitoring, broadcast recording, and I don't know what else. If it's, let's say, a multi-room studio or a school, then you've got various mixing rooms, various recording rooms, and in every day would like maybe to use another recording room because that's available. The room you've used yesterday is occupied, but you want to load your same session and start from the same point you stopped yesterday, let's say with minimal adjustments. Only really what's necessary to adjust in order to get in the new session and start working again. So it's all about that, and it's all about also the people who work at it. And I was talking to a few guys before, and I said, in a sense, we went into that because nobody told us that we need to stop. Because we started moving audio around, but then popped up another problem. We got devices, how are we going to control them? Okay, so we'll provide device control. Yes, but now what happens if I crash and someone takes my devices? It's a no-no. Okay, so we need to add ownership and using and logic into that, and priorities. Some guys got more priorities. My devices, I don't want nobody else to touch them. I want to lock outputs, or I want to lock those devices, or I want to allow people to patch, but they cannot change the sample rate, and some parameters they cannot change because they're mine and they're important to my session. You can latch onto my system, but you cannot interfere with it. And all of that's got to be implemented as logic. I tried to be on time. Few minutes, so a few stories. And these are real stories. I will not use names because I can't, but they're real stories. A TV show. They came to us, and this stuff happens like every day. It's just example I picked off one of our sales representatives. They wanted processing by Dan Dugan. We got a plugin that does 64-channel of Dugan processing. They wanted Dugan processing for a MUDI console. So they got an MGB for MUDI. MGB is It's an I/O made by DigiGrid. It's for coax, for copper MADI. Multi-rack for processing and a server. Okay, brilliant. Now they're adding a Pro Tools system and they want to record. Not a problem. We've got a Pro Tools interface, just add that to the system. They like that, but they want backup recording, but they wanted not to invest money actually in it. So we told them, not a problem. Split another Cat6 cable to Logic running on a laptop, and you've got a backup recording system. Not a problem. It works. From one thing to another, we got a network of 256 channels of processing and recording happening. 256 channels because they got two MADI devices. Each MADI of the MGB devices can do 128 channels of MADI at 48K. Well, this is one user story, and it evolved from, they started with just the processing. And then they heard from another production that they can do the recording. So that's how, from one point to another. Another story is a personal story of an audio engineer. He wanted his own signature processing, and on his tour, he was working with an SSL console. So again, SSL console runs MADI, so the same setup, multi-rack for control, an MGB to get the audio in and out of the system, and a server to do processing. But now he moved to the US, and the US didn't have an SSL console for him. They gave him a Yamaha console. So he bought cards for the Yamaha console, same setup, same signature sound, everything in his backpack. Now he got a digital console, and he started thinking, I've got a Yamaha console and I've got a digital console, and I want actually to route audio between them while doing processing and while I'm recording. Not a problem. All of the digital consoles are equipped with a Waves card. Plug them, you assign them to you, do the routing, the regular, we call it the submarine interface, where you set input to outputs. It's like the submarine game, where you sync submarines. So we call it submarine interface. That kind of interface, very simple. Every audio guy knows that those patch bays. Just patch them through, save the session, and you're up and running. The church has said, I told you the story about they needed multiple preamps on stage, just get IOX devices, these are analog to SoundGrid, put them on stage, run them to Pro Tools on the other end. We need also to monitor in a control room, so get another device there, split channels over there, route audio there, and we need everything in real time to process in real time, just add a server. The main story behind all of these stories, the thread that runs through all of these stories, is the flexibility, and that, in a sense, everything is driven by user needs. They're not restricted by the network. They don't come to us and they describe a network, they describe what they need. And it's very scalable. They start from, let's say, from processing and get into recording. They start from recording and then do processing. Doesn't matter. Another church got a Pro Tools room, so they've got DLSs. That's actually a Digilink interface to SoundGrid plus a server inside. And they got another venue with a Yamaha console equipped with Yamaha cards. They got another touring show with a MADI console, so they got their MGBs there. And a broadcast room with another console. Again, these are optical MADI. And now what happens is that they start playing around with the equipment. This is the actual story where the broadcast console is using for processing the server that's actually in the Pro Tools room. Just because it's there, it's available. They see it on the network. They don't want to record to Pro Tools post-processing. So there's a server there sitting there doing nothing. Why not use it? And we get stories like that on a daily basis. Again, the idea is that it's user-driven, it's simple to do, and networks should be simple, and we think that should speak to the actual people using those systems, especially if these are our audio guys. It has to talk to us. We need to feel comfortable about it. Thanks. On time.
Thank you, Gil.